If you could put yourself as an onlooker to the valley of Megiddo, when the enemies of God have come out against him, and you watch Jesus Christ come forth out of heaven, and you see the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, not come as the Lamb that was slain before the foundation of the world, but come as the Lion who will dethrone every king, who will disrupt the world system, who will overthrow every enemy, and do so not in a struggle. You ever struggled? You ever struggled with the world, the flesh, and the devil? Do you understand? Our God never does, never has, and never will. You ever struggle with understanding what is going on? Do you realize our God never has and never will? Do you understand? He is not thwarted by the situations that arise. The old preachers used to say, has it ever occurred to you that nothing's ever occurred to him? Nothing caught him off guard about what has gone on. There's never been a stock market crash that caused him to lose money, lose riches. Do you realize he has always been and always will be in supreme control? And one of the things that does, you have to understand this. One of the things that does is it causes him to operate on a slower schedule than you and I would like. He is not nervous about what you're going through. He's not nervous about it at all. And as a result, he's comfortable in the midst of the storm, staying asleep. Now, it will probably become a message later on down the line, so when that happens, pretend like you've never heard it. But I've been thinking about this morning. We oftentimes look at Jesus calming the storm on the Sea of Galilee when he stood up and said, "Peace, be still." We look at that as though it is in the Scriptures to indicate that Jesus will calm your storms. But that is not why it's there. It is not there so you can go, okay, Jesus is going to quiet my storms. It is there so you can get comfortable with him sleeping through them. It is there so that you can know that he is capable of calming any storm at any time, in any place. And when he doesn't, it is because he wants you to know who he is. And he allows the storms for a purpose and for a reason. And so he does not come with reassurance to his disciples when he calms the storm, but rather a rebuke comes with the calming. We ask for the calming all the time, don't we? Oh God, quiet the storm, quiet the storm. The quieting of the storm comes with a rebuking. O ye of little faith. Because that story's not in there so you beg him to calm the storm. It's in there so you will recognize he's got this. And quit fretting and trust him. Water's coming in the boat. They've already been bailing. What are you going to do? You can either bail till you're blue in the face and it be unsuccessful anyway, or you can enjoy the water. What are we doing? Well, I guess if we go down, we're going down singing. I reckon if we go down, he's okay with that, then I guess I am. Well, we might as well quit worrying about it. Nothing we're doing is helping anyway. We've been rowing and toiling and it ain't getting us anywhere. We've been bailing water and we're up to our eyeballs in it. What's the point of trying? He's not trying. Must mean he's okay with what's happening. The whole point of that passage is so you and I would understand if he's okay with it happening, we're supposed to be okay with it happening. We don't read it that way. We read it like if we have a storm, we better wake Jesus up because he's the only one that can calm it. The reality is, he knew about the storm before it started. The truth is when we go through storms, it opens up our human nature. As soon as we go through it, Master, carest thou not? That says a whole lot more about you than it does him. When you question him, it says a whole lot more about you than it does him. God, how could you? Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Has he ever done wrong? Answer me. Has he ever done wrong? Well, look at verse 15 of our psalm. To show that the Lord's upright, he is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him. So I will ask you again, has he ever done anything wrong? So when you start questioning one who has never done any wrong, and there is no wrong in him, you ever messed up? You ever accidentally done something wrong? Like, I'll give you an example. This is one I'm bad about. I have to be very intentional not to steal the pen at a bank. I rob banks all the time. It's terrible. You say, you shouldn't say that. They'll come looking for you. You ever accidentally, if they give it to you in the little thing, especially when and you're like, oh, I'm still holding on to the pen. I got to remember to put that in there. Then you get it, you take it out, you drive off, you get home, and you're like, oh, there's their pen. You know what that's called? Theft. It wasn't yours. You took it. You know how many times I've driven back to the bank to give it back? You say, why would you do that? In fact, the bank tellers, you didn't have to do that. Well, it wasn't mine. Yeah, I did. I'm not supposed to steal from you, even if you say it's okay. I've messed up and stole. You ever accidentally lied to somebody? You thought you were saying the right thing, then you found out it wasn't the right thing? Do you understand? God has never accidentally lied. Not once. There's no lie in him. Even when he tells the truth. Do you understand? He's not one time accidentally done wrong. Not once. Now that's what makes him God, to be honest with you. Even if I speak foolishly, misread your situation, didn't understand the gravity of it, which I promise you this, he knows better than you know. But even if I speak foolishly, he misread or misunderstood your thing, he'd still do what was right. Because that's just who he is. So when you and I begin to question him, begin to doubt him, begin to wonder, as he's asleep in the boat, and our storms are raging, and we bring our question, Master, carest thou not that we perish? Do you understand? That says a whole lot more about us and what we think of him than who he is. Why? Because at any time he can get up and 3 words later, that sea is glass. The winds are gone. The waves are stilled. At any time, he can get up and fix the circumstance. But you see, we only have faith when the glassy seas and the waves and the winds are died down. We only have faith when it's going well, and not when it looks like it's falling apart. Man, Brother Brian on Thursday night was talking about that preacher from Romania. I can never remember his name. Rumbrand, I think, or something like that. I can't ever remember how to say that guy's name. Do you understand the character some of these guys had in prison for Christ? I mean, it's unbelievable. We get a hangnail and we're like, well, I'm not sure I can go any further, God. How could you do this to me? Imagine being upset. Imagine being upset as you're in heaven for eternity that God let your 401k dip a little. Or how about disappear? Just imagine, here you are in heaven, and he's like, okay, look around. Now talk to me again about your retirement plan. How you were so mad about your retirement falling through. Maybe you missed it. Maybe you set your affection on things below and not on things above. Maybe you misread what was important, just little. When we come to the realization that suffering and death just speed up our ability to see Him, change the way we think a little bit, wouldn't it? We're like, oh God, you got to stop this. We might die. He's like, can I not call 1,000? A legion of angels? I can stop this at any time. In fact, he says this, why would I pray that this hour pass from me? For this hour I came. Do you understand? He came to die. Are you better than him? Are you better than your master? If he suffered and he died for us willingly, but when we suffer, we just look for ways out. How are we following his example? When was the last time his work made us glad? Well, we're a bit more like Peter. When he begins to teach that the Son of Man must suffer the hands of men, we begin to rebuke him. Not so, Lord. It's not happening on my watch. Look now, I'm a good Christian. You know what his response was? Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou savorest not the things that be of God. You mean suffering? The world is looking for ways out of suffering. Do you understand that? As a child of God, you're supposed to be looking at suffering differently. I'll never forget, there's a missionary in the Philippines. He's a Filipino man, lives there, grew up there, born and raised in the Philippines. And he's in the Philippines asking for some support. I'll never forget reading it. His request was, this is so humbling. His request was, we sure could use a little bit of help, but not too much, because I'd hate to not have to live by faith. Wouldn't take much, a couple $100 a month, and they're golden. He's like, hey, we could use a little help, but I don't want too much help because I wouldn't have to live by faith then. We start having to live by faith, and we get nervous about it, asking God to fix it. God, it doesn't add up. You better fix it. What if that's the whole point to begin with? Instead of spending all of our time praying and asking God to go against what He's trying to accomplish in our lives, why not learn the lesson and trust Him in it? Can you trust God? I mean, really, can you trust Him? I mean, in your situation, I mean, in your life, in your set of circumstance, I mean, take everything that's happened to you. Can you trust God? So what's God ever done for me to begin with? That's a valid question. Why don't you do this just real quick? Just look around. He created all that. You understand He created all of it? He said, for thou, Lord, hast made me glad through thy work. I will triumph in the works of thy hands. Not just being glad about it, but it being the victory. What's better? What's better? Believing God can give you a promised land, or entering into the promised land and turning your back on Him? Which one's better? You see, because here's who I just described. On one hand, you have Abraham, and Abraham believed God, and it was counted unto him for righteousness. Abraham staggered not at the promise, but Abraham did not receive the promise. What do you mean? I mean, God told him that his seed would multiply like the stars of heaven and the sand on the sea. Sure. You know how many seed he had when he died? Isaac. That's not saying I can count that high, God. They hadn't received the promise. The children of Israel go into the promised land doubting God. Isn't that ironic? Can God furnish a table in the wilderness? Can God furnish a table in the wilderness? They went into the promised land doubting Him. He didn't go into the promised land and believed Him. You know who we are? We're His people, enjoying the benefits of those who went on before us that never saw it. That's who we are. And we doubt Him, and we question, and we worry, and we wonder. You know who made the Hall of Faith? You know who makes Hebrews 11? Abraham. And his faith. Looking for a city whose builder and maker's God. Trusting in Him. Believing. And you know what made them so special? You know what made them of note in the Scriptures? Their faith. By faith, Abraham. Through faith, Sarah. By faith, Moses. By faith, by faith, by faith, by faith. Do you know what made them of note in the Word of God? It was their faith. It was not the result of their faith, but it was their faith. We base it on faith, on results. We live in a society that is performance-based. And so we base how good you are as a Christian on your results. Oh, yeah. How do I know if you're a good Christian? How do I know if you're a good soul winner? Well, how many people have you won to Christ? Wow, you've won a lot of people to Christ. You must be a good soul winner. What if God just gave you all the easy ones? Because of someone else's sowing. One sows, another reaps. If you're reaping a lot, you must not have done the sowing. Oh, but you think you're hot stuff because He let you reap. Because you didn't have to go and sow and not see anybody saved. Because you couldn't handle that because you just stopped telling people if you weren't seeing. So He's coddling to you and you think you're something. We're going to get to heaven, and there's going to be somebody that sowed for years faithfully and didn't see anybody saved, and God's going to say, now that's somebody who is doing it. But they don't have thousands of converts. How are they doing it? Yeah, but they're the ones who told all those people you trusted. They're the ones that sowed the seed. You got to enjoy the harvest. And they didn't have to see a harvest to keep faithful. They just kept sowing anyway. Some of us are like, man, I went visitation one time, didn't see anybody saved, so I'm not going back. I told somebody about the Lord and nobody got saved, so I'm not telling anybody else. What does 1 John 5 tell us is the victory? Do we know what it is? I'll give you a hint. The songwriter wrote about it. They said, it is the victory. Even our faith. Faith is the victory. Not a new building. That's not the victory. Do you understand that? That's not the victory. Faith is the victory. There's a man died in the pulpit of this church, believing that God could see some young people in this building. Am I telling it right, Miss Virgie? He didn't see it, did he? There's a whole classroom downstairs. There's a couple going to get baptized this afternoon. When was the last time His timeline worked for us. Well, you can tell a lot about what you think about somebody with how you view their time. You got somebody coming over, you want to impress them, you want to have a good impression on them. You're going to invite them over to dinner. Well, what works for you guys? Right? Very accommodating. How about this? Is that good? Does that work? And if they were to say, hey, we had something come up, can we push it off? Yeah, absolutely. Whatever works, whatever you need. Running a few minutes late, no big deal. We're used to it. Whatever. We're just glad you came. But you let God try that in your life. You're like, what are you doing? How dare you suggest that what you told me today you're going to try to do tomorrow? You're going to push this off 5 minutes? We value people coming over for dinner more than we value God. Shame on us. This is a whole lot harder than it is in my notes, I promise you. But do us good. Do us good. So just start thinking about who He is and realign with that. His works. Learn to be glad in them. Is God in control of your life? Is God in control of your life? Well, I'll ask each and every one, is God in control of your life? Do you believe that God is in control of your life? You glad about it? Or you been complaining? Isn't that His work? Some of you, God brought you here. Some of you have tried to leave and God told you no. You say, what is that? His working in your life? And what? Now you're mad at it? When was the last time His works made us glad? Can you even see Him at work? Can you see Him at work in your life? So much is going on. It's so overwhelming. We don't have the answers. Here's God trying to grow our faith. Trying to teach us and mature us spiritually. You mean He hasn't just written us off because we didn't have enough faith, but He's willing to invest more in us? He cares enough about us that He's willing to work on our spirit and work on our shortcomings You know what we go? We go to him and say, God, I know you're at work, but maybe a little less work. Lord, could you give us a break just a little bit? Say, why? Because we're not glad that he's at work. When he humbles us, nobody likes it. Boy, don't we need it. Come on now. Don't you need a little bit of humbling in your life? Aren't you a little arrogant? A little proud? Most of us this morning got dressed, looked in the mirror and went, You're going to tell me you're not just a little arrogant? God had to put blinders on some of our spouses. In my case, just made them literally blind. We can be old and fat and bald and look in the mirror and go, still got it. Still got what? You ain't got your hair, you ain't got your looks, you ain't got your physique. What do you still got? You know what we still have? Pride. By the way, the inverse of that, that's the arrogancy. The inverse of that is just as much pride. Where all you think about is you and how bad you are. How worthless you are, and you can't stop thinking about how awful you are. It's the same spirit, it's just the other side of the coin. It's pride. Don't we need God to help us with that? Don't we need God to help us with our anger? So he gently and lovingly puts us in situations that make us angry? So we can learn not to be angry? And you come into church mad because God's put you in 7 situations this week that got you angry? Without even one time stopping to think, wow, he cares enough about me to work on my shortcomings. So he doesn't just rebuke the disciples, "O ye of little faith." You know what he asks them? "Wherefore didst thou doubt?" Why'd you blow up again? Why'd you question again? You don't think I got this? I will triumph in the works of thy hands. When was what God is doing enough to make you rejoice and triumph in? Brings us to our verse this morning. O Lord, how great are thy works. I love that because verse 4, he talks about what it does. Verse 5, he's showing you what it does. Hey, your works make me glad. I triumph in your works. So by verse 5, he just has to stop and say, "Oh Lord, how great are thy works." You know how great his works are? Do you understand who we're dealing with? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. There was no light, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That's awesome. There was no heavens, no universe, no firmament, and He spoke it into existence. There was no earth, and He spoke it into existence. There weren't plants, there weren't trees, there wasn't an ocean, and He spoke it into existence. There were no birds flying in the air. He didn't have a bird over here that He said, "Now how can I make that? What can I do?" No, there was none of that. And by His infinite wisdom, He spoke them into existence. And they can fly, swim, whatever an ostrich does. I'd say run, but have you seen one? I know what ostriches do. You know what they do? Terrify. Those things are scary. They'll peck at you? No, I'm good. You know what's amazing? From the biggest creatures all the way down to the smallest creatures, man, they just go about life. You know what's wild about it? Something dies. And here come birds and animals picking it clean. And then the ants come and worms and everything else. Before long, the floor is clean again. You know how wild it is to think that the God of heaven took enough time in His creation to plan it so that this thing isn't just always a mess? All the fruit falls off the trees and could just sit there and rot, be nasty. He's got an animal for it when it's still good. He's got animals for it when it's going bad. He's got animals that like it when it's all the way bad. Isn't it amazing that it all just works? They always marvel at these creatures, these birds that fly across the ocean to a specific spot every year. Or the salmon that swim up the same stream where they were hatched, and it's like, how do they know? Well, there's a God in heaven who had all that planned out for them. Has it to where it works just exactly right. He's got it down to the very detail. Do you understand that? He's got this little creature that eats that, and this other creature that eats that creature, and this creature that eats that creature. And you know what we do? You know what we do? I'll tell you. First one to admit. You know what we do? God, why'd you make mosquitoes? Oh, couldn't you just like not make that? There's no telling the chaos would happen if God just took every mosquito out of here. And I don't like them. I think it's the second best thing about eternity. Mosquitoes are gone. You ever been upset about flies? Man, flies can be a pest, can't they? Do you understand how big a mess this would be if we didn't have flies? Some of you are allergic to bees, deathly scared of them. We wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for them. See what I did there? Be here. Anyway. If he can take care of his creation, you not think he can take care of you? If he can plot and plan and organize and work out the logistics for all these animals and all these things to work out exactly like they should, you don't think he can take care of you? I'm not even going to read the rest of the verses that I got on here because I haven't even got started in my lesson this morning. I haven't even got started in it. So we'll pick back up next week with it. But I promise you this, you know what the psalmist is talking about? Oh Lord, how great are thy works. You know what he keeps referencing? Go outside and look up. Just look up. Tell me how tall that is. I mean, pop your head outside and go, how tall is that? How much does the water weigh on our planet? You understand? He measured that in the small of his hand. He looked out from one end of the universe to the other and he said, that far. Just a span. Then he tells you and I, he says, hey, you see how much higher the heavens are than the earth? Yeah, we can't even put a number on it. He goes, that's how higher my mercies are. It's how great my mercies are. How you got that much mercy? Yeah. I'm trying to tell you, his works are great. I don't know I could be that merciful. No, you can't. But he can. So maybe we should just come down off the high horse a little bit and recognize him for who he is. Say, you know what, God, I've been looking at things all wrong. Look how great your works are. If you can do all this, then what I'm going through is not going to surprise you. It's not going to scare you. It doesn't somehow sabotage your plan. I'll just trust you. God, if you want to sleep on the boat, while we're dealing with this one, I think I'll take a nap too. I don't know if you've ever been out on a kayak. The more you paddle, the more wet you get. These disciples are rowing hard, not getting anywhere. Water's filling up, they're bailing it. I guarantee you, they're soaked. Might as well enjoy the water if you're going to be wet. I do know this. If I got to be wet, I'd rather be in the water than just wet outside. I mean, wet clothes just standing there. That's nasty. I despise that. Oh, but look who has to do it. Look back at verse 4. For thou, Lord, hast made me glad through thy works. I will triumph in the works of thy hand. You know who has to do it? He does. Can I tell you, the very fact that we could even be glad at what he's doing in our life, the fact that we could look around and see that God's at work, and that's enough. God, you have to do that. Just to give us that awareness, just to give us that ability. God, you have to do that. And the realization that you are going to show me that so I can learn to trust you more. Wow. You must really care. If you'll make me glad through your work, I'll triumph in them. So here's Paul. 3 times I besought the Lord. He keeps telling me no. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities. Why? Because this is the work of God in my life. Lest I be exalted, he's keeping me humbled. He's helping me. He's making me usable. I've been trying to change the way I pray lately. I've always wanted God to use me. Since a kid, I'm talking about a teenager, I'd stay up at night dreaming about God using me. My prayer hasn't been, God, use me. Lately, it's been, God, help me be usable. If you don't want to use me, you don't have to. I don't deserve it. But I want to know that if you needed somebody, you could look at me and say, okay, I can use that one. Help me be usable. There's a big difference between those two prayers. You say, what is that? He's just still working on us. What a good God. What a good God. Let's stop here this morning. Father, we love you. Thank you for loving us.